Hello, and welcome to the BOFIN Buzz, the podcast for anyone fascinated by farming's future. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the BOFIN Buzz. And I'm delighted to have joining us today Andy Barr, who is a grower down in Kent, who many of you will be familiar with. Andy, hello, how are you?
Hello, Tom. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's not raining, so that's good news.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, so we're in the middle of show season at the moment, aren't we? Or at least halfway through, anyway. I'm delighted to see you at Cereals and at Groundswell, of course, Andy. So, and you very kindly said, "Yep, no, we'll let's go for a BOFIN Buzz." Very kind of you to do that. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Andy, because do you know, I don't think I've actually ever visited your farm.
No, not yet. It's a difficult place to get in and out of.
Well, I'd very much like to, but I sincerely hope that we'll all know a lot more about it by the end of this episode. So, but look, before we get started, Andy, could you, if there were three key things that you would set about changing in your farming system, or you're already changing, perhaps, what would they be?
I mean, the first thing which is really relevant to BOFIN and the Slimers trial I've been involved in is that in my past studies, I've always been really frustrated by seeing research that was done by academic researchers that either wasn't relevant to what I was doing on farm, or actually there was no intention that it would ever be communicated to farmers. So I'm really passionate about trying to bridge that gap. The second thing, I would love to become sustainable. I know that means different things to different people. I don't mean sustaining my soils as they are now. I mean having a sustainable system that goes round in a loop and could theoretically go on forever. We first talked about it in the 70s. I don't think we're any closer 50 years later. And the third thing is, I would love it if all my buildings that were now rented out for various things like stage scenery and storage and things like that could actually go back to being farming. And if farming was profitable enough and valued enough, that we could go back to having a system where we just farm, because that's what I love, the farming.
Oh, no, that's great. That's a really good choice, and let's talk about those in more detail in a bit. But first of all, tell us about your farm and why you got into farming. Whereabouts do you farm?
We are, according to Kent Life magazine, in the geographical centre of Kent, the very centre, and I mean it's a family farm. And my great-grandfather came down from Scotland with his cows on the train, in the end of the 1800s. But I wasn't always sure about what I wanted to do. And I read natural sciences at university, and then I went to work for a bank. And I had a kind of epiphany moment on the tube many years ago, sweating away in my suit, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here. I want to get outside. But little did I know I'd be sweating away in a suit for sweating away covered in dust, mud, muck, whatever. But I'm glad I did it.
So the farm itself, how many hectares are you farming? Is it all arable, or have you got some livestock as well?
We've had quite a change around in recent years, to be honest. When I came back, I farmed with my father and my brother, and we farmed over 2,000 acres, and we had arable and first of all we had a dairy herd, then Sussex beef cattle, we had Romney sheep, and we had 1,000 Romney sheep and 100 cattle and about 1,200 acres arable. But I split up with my brother, all amicably. But and so we've then been trying to still incorporate the livestock, as it were, but they're not my livestock; they're my brother's. And in fact, we lost several hundred acres that we've been renting forever to the Forestry Commission, who bought it and planted it with trees. So now I farm. Right. I farm less than half. I probably farm 40% of what I used to, but with the diversification and the now farming the better land, actually profitability isn't very much different, which isn't good really. But is good in some.
Well, no, I suppose at least you've got a profitable business. That's the main thing. How you do it. Well, I'm sure we're going to be talking about those things as we go on. But just going to that first point that you mentioned there, because obviously this is something that's very close to what BOFIN is looking to do, getting
Yeah.
research out onto the farm. And now you mentioned, about academic research not really being applied properly on the farm. Do you want to just sort of talk a bit more about that?
I'll give you some examples then, because when I did my basis qualification 20 plus years ago, something showing my age, but and I did it on bicropping or companion cropping. Now that's all,
Right.
kind of a buzzword and everything.
Yes.
And but it wasn't at the time. Obviously, the basis examiners kind of furrowed their brows and wondered what I was going on about. But I went to, so one of the things I went to see was a bean and wheat crop bicrop at Reading University. There's a woman doing a PhD there, and she was finding great
Right.
results. And I said, "Wow,
Sorry, and this was 20 years ago, you say?
yes, probably
Wow.
2000, 2002, something like that." I said, "This is fantastic.
Yeah.
How are you going to get this? How are we going to get this out on farm?" And she said, "Well," she kind of looked at me in really confused and said, "Well, no, I'm just writing up this PhD, and then I've got a job researching somewhere else." And so it was just a dead end as far as it was never going to get on farm. There was no intention of getting it on farm. It was just some interesting research, and I came across it
How
again. I did
extraordinary.
it is. In my 40s, I did a PG cert with Nottingham University, and some of the researchers I came across, who actually wanted to get stuff out on farm, would complain that actually their careers were more harmed by that than enhanced, because their scientific research careers, their success was measured in the amount of scientific papers published. And you didn't give a lot of kudos to something printed in the Farmers Weekly, for instance, or or talked about at an AHDB conference, anything like that. So it's really frustrating. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's why things like BOFIN are so good, because it's farmers and
Yeah.
the researchers getting together.
Well, as you can imagine, Andy, that absolutely plays to what BOFIN is all about, and it's why I set up BOFIN really, and I realised that my background as a journalist, going around farms, and visiting only the best farms in the country, of course, and everyone was. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people were doing their own on-farm trials, applying
Yeah.
their own research. Not without any help or support or anything. And I thought, well, look, that's why I set up BOFIN, to represent farmers and so on. And I share your pain, actually, as far as that academic thing. I think things are changing, which is good news. And there does seem to be, so for example, DEFRA's Farming Innovation Pathways, which is, sort of quite a substantial amount of money that they're now putting in to on-farm research. And of course,
Good.
one of the projects that's come out of that is Slimers, which is strategies leading to improved management and enhanced resilience against slugs, which you're very kindly helping us with. So just to, for those in the audience who don't know, the Slimers is a 3-year program. It's DEFRA funded under the Farming Innovations programs. We've got 5 industry partners within it as well. Well, therein lies a little bit of a tale, in that one of them was the small robot company. We're just looking to replace them. And there's also Agritech, UK Agritech Centre, Aggravation, John Innes Centre, and Harper Adams University within the project. And we are looking to develop new strategies to control slugs. And you are very kindly helping us with that. So just describe the trial that that we put in place last autumn, and that you were monitoring over the autumn.
Yeah, so we have a 100 square meter plot, basically, and every 10 meters there is a slug trap. So we had 100 slug traps, And over the course, after we planted the wheat, this was all set out. And over the course of the autumn, we went round and monitored weekly how many slugs we had in the different traps. And this was tied in with the different soil types. So we put it on a bit of a slope. We tried to get some buried soil types, and we tried to put it where we did have a slug problem, which, of course, last autumn was actually the most slug pellets I've applied for a long time, well, probably ever.
Yeah.
And so it was a good autumn for measuring slugs. And even with me applying loads of slug pellets, there was masses of slugs there, which was worrying to see. But we also actually we integrated some beetle traps in between as well. So there were like 20 beetle traps.
Yes. So you were doing the beetle monitoring as well. So this was actually this came out of so the current year that we're doing with the Slimers trial. We've been also been doing a trial into slug-resistant wheat, and this is one that started back in autumn 2022. And it was in the first year of that. Well, autumn 2022, if you remember, was extremely dry, and there were no slugs. We didn't find any slugs. But what we did find is lots of beetles, and it was from that the farmers who were taking part in that trial said, began to say, well, what are the beetles doing in terms of slug control? So that's why we introduced it into the Slimers trial. So, and I think you had 20 traps. So we're working with Kelly Jowett from Rothamsted Research, and she's got a really neat sort of protocol for measuring slugs, and this design of measuring beetles, and this design of beetle trap that I think you had 20 of them, I think, within your grid of 100 slug traps. Is that right?
Yes, and basically, you put in some. It's a glass below the ground level, and a plastic glass, and you put in some water and some washing up liquid so that they can't climb out or eat each other, and they fall in essentially underneath a cap. But I didn't do so well on the beetle trapping, I must say. I was religious on counting my slugs, but as someone who's been trying to build up beetles and beneficials for, I haven't sprayed any insecticides for 15 years. It was alarming how many I was catching and killing off, frankly. And so now I'm sure Dr. Kelly Jowett would, she loves beetles as well. And I think, she probably worked out the numbers she'd killed and thought, well, it's an absolute drop in the ocean compared to what there is. But it was alarming to me. And also, they were extremely smelly after being dead in the water for a week, and I got in trouble from my wife for counting them on the kitchen table, so that didn't go down too much.
No, I'm not surprised. Actually, you and everyone else who tried, I think there were 5 or 6 farmers within the group who tried the beetle trap. But and everyone has said the same as you, Andy, in that they were surprised just how many beetles there were, and it kind of opens your eyes actually to the there's this population that you just don't even realize exists. Really, you don't see it so much. And as you say, unfortunately, some beetles were killed in this experiment. So apologies to those listeners of a sensitive nature. But it is for good, for a good scientific cause, and we do hope it's just a drop in the ocean as well. But we haven't yet sort of analysed the results from that. But I think everyone else's reaction to that is kind of reflects yours, that it was a real surprise just how many beetles there are in our crops, and we wonder, perhaps we do underestimate their contribution. It's great to hear actually that you're not using insecticides. One thing I'm hoping to gather from this, and I don't know whether we'll see it from the data, is that if there is anyone who's using insecticides, who is monitoring their beetles, whether an insecticide application, perhaps a BYDV spray, might have influenced the population of beetles. But we haven't yet been through the data, so we can't tell. But we do know that insecticide use, and especially autumn insecticide use, does affect beetles. What we don't know yet is just what their contribution to slug control is. But
no,
sorry,
that's really interesting, because I did when I was doing natural sciences at university. I loved ecology, and it was all about the knock-on effect that you have if you cut out one part of the ecological chain. And I stopped using insecticides, or I was kind of cut down on insecticides. And one year we had terrible. It was on the oilseed rape, and we're having real problems. This was years ago, pre-freebie, all that, but all the leaves were getting shredded, and I applied an insecticide, much to against my better judgment. And you know what? We hadn't had any problem with slugs, but after that, we got rid of the leaf miner, and we suddenly got slugs. But that is just,
Wow.
that's just a really anecdotal thing, and this is why we need to. You referred to on-farm trials. I've been doing them for years, but sometimes you do them for a year, or you do a tram line or a couple of tram lines, and then you get an idea, but you don't get any hard data often that can be carried forward. You just get anecdotal kind of feelings, but they'd be interesting.
And that's what we're hoping that this trial will benefit from. So the great advantage of the likes of yourselves. So there are 27 slug slews this year, monitoring traps and gathering data. And hopefully we're getting the best of both worlds from that, Andy, in that we're getting the good data that you've been capturing along with everyone else. And because we've got 27 sites, that's 27 replications across the country in different situations and so on. And so that should give statistically relevant data. Well, we know it does because Keith Walters, our entomologist at Harper Adams University, has already given some indications that he's got the right sort of data to do the statistical analysis on it and so on. And he's come out with some preliminary findings. Have you heard what the findings are, by the way?
I haven't. No, I would be really interested to know because it's great that it's over 27. Because when I look at my 100-meter grid, you kind of think, well, is there a pattern? Well, I don't know if there's a pattern or not. And you can't just do that on your own.
So you didn't recognise that there was a pattern. I mean, one of the main thing, the reason we're doing this trial, just to sort of fill in listeners, is to find out about patch location. So this is previous work from Keith Walters that has found that slugs gather in patches in the field, and quite reliably so as well, and also that's related to certain soil characteristics within the field. It's mainly due to clay content and sand content and organic matter. I think are the three main parameters, but there's some other things in there as well. And so Keith has already established this, and he's done quite a lot of work in previous years that this is pretty reliable. And so the idea of what we're doing here is turning that previous sort of rather academic research, if you like, into something that is much more we can have as farmers much more confidence in, so that we can reliably switch on and off our pellet applicator and know that we're still doing a good job on the slugs. And so what his the trial, what he really wants to get from the data is A, to confirm that they're gathering in patches, B, to get a good idea of just how reliable those patches are, and especially where the edges are. Where do you actually turn on and off the applicator and so on. Well, the preliminary data shows that yes, they do gather in patches, but he's got statistically relevant data to improve the patch location within the fields, and also he's got some really good data that relates to the soil characteristics. Because if you remember, there was some intensive soil sampling.
Yeah.
That I don't know I don't think you actually carried out the sampling. I think it was Clive Blacker who did the sampling, wasn't
Clive
it?
did it all, so that was really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
so that was 100 at each point.
Yeah. No, I wondered about that for the future. I'd be interested to see what the results say. Because of my soil type varies. We did it on the slight. It varies across the slope. But also I have lots of soil types going across my farm like that. So I wonder, I know a square is quite easy and you can do it everywhere, but whether we could have got more of a variation by having a long rectangle or something like that. But that's one for future discussion. But it'll be really interesting to see what those results say.
That's a good question. That's something perhaps we should put to Keith, who's who's been designing the protocol of the trial. I know that he's he'd quite like the trial replicated again this autumn. And would you be up for doing the trial again?
Yeah. Well, as you know, we put all the data in on the Husk app, which is very good and makes it easier. Although there's a few little tweaks on the Husk app that could make it even easier, basically. So that would help.
Yes, and that's yeah, no, and we've taken that on board. So we've been using an app, as you say, developed by Husk, to monitor all of the traps, which is great. It does work well. I've used it myself as well on my trial at home here. Um, and but it has its limitations for this, and we are looking to take it on. Whether we can actually develop the app in time for this year's trial, Andy.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we
Yeah.
can, but we might look. We certainly got it in mind to. We've taken on board everyone's comments, and we are going to develop the app. I'm just not confident we're going to have it ready for this autumn. But if you can bear with us, we'll be doing that. But the good thing is that we won't have to do the intensive soil sampling. So this is something that Clive has been around every site and has had to do take 100 samples, at each trap location, and send those into Harper Adams University for analysis. The outcome of that is that we now got a really good correlation between the soil maps. Do you remember he did an EC scan at the start of the season?
That was interesting.
So we've got a really good correlation now. Yeah, we've got a really good correlation between the soil maps and the actual soil sampling. So we don't have to do the intensive soil sampling any longer. But yeah, it'd be any other observations about the? I mean, did you get much slug damage within your crop?
What did surprise me was because I put many slug pellets on, basically, and I'm someone who doesn't want to put. I don't want lots of outside inputs, but one of the reasons I got involved was we've been direct drilling since 2010, and we gave up the plough in 2000, and both times we've reduced tillage where the slug numbers go up and then they've come down again. Of course, this autumn was an exception. But what amazed me was we didn't get too much, although you could see some striping on the leaves, because I've seen this before and put a lot of slug pellets on. We didn't get too much damage. So it wasn't, it's not going to hopefully be a yield effector or anything like that. So what I was surprised was to see how many, I don't know how many I killed off, but how many slugs are actually there still in my traps, every week in, week out, despite having this barrage of slug pellets against them.
Yeah, it does make you think, just what contribution pellets are making to the slug population. So as you say, if you didn't apply any slug pellets, would you have had a crop at all?
Really, don't think so.
Yeah, and then, but if Keith's hypothesis is correct, which it's already been proven that you can just apply it in patches. Then it would be good to know, as you say, you're someone who doesn't like to spread insecticides, albeit ferric phosphate, which is a relatively harmless insecticide, or molluscicide, willy-nilly. But it would be nice if you could just apply it in patches, where and confidently know that you're going to keep those slugs under control.
Absolutely, which is another reason I got involved, and because what I often used to do, you'd go out, you'd see where the damage was, and then going up and down, turning on and off where you could see where the damage was. But the trouble with that is it's already too late. They've already affected the wheat establishment so much that you can see it. So although you'll variably applying it and applying less, it's too late. So if we can get a jump on that and just put it in those spots before, then ideal.
Yeah, well, that's the idea of the project. There are a couple of other developments on the project, by the way, and I don't know whether you're up for being involved in these. So first of all, I mentioned just a minute ago about slug-resistant wheat, and we've been doing this now for a couple of years. You weren't involved in the slug-resistant wheat project last year. I don't know whether this is something you would consider being involved in. It does mean applying drilling patches of a different wheat within your wheat crop. Is this something you'd consider?
Possibly, I'd have to look into it. I'm
Yeah.
always also speaking looking at your standard series yesterday, and looking at the NCS and the Pulse project. I'm interested in that, and
Yes.
of course with my sustainability goal, and so I've got to be a bit careful about. I love doing trials, and I'd do loads if I could, but it's about you. Sometimes I do a lot of trials with Syngenta on conservation agriculture as well, and
Oh, right.
so
Yep.
you can if you do too many, you don't do them well enough. So it's about targeting it right, I think, and so
Well,
that
look,
I can do them all
I
properly.
tell you what, let's move on to your next area. I mean, slug-resistant wheat is something that we can catch up with
Yeah,
on
yeah,
another time. But because, yeah, let's talk about sustainability. And you mentioned it a couple of times just now, that you're already doing some trials on sustainability, and perhaps you'd like to do some more trials on that. But just talk through what sustainability means to you on your farm.
yeah. I think there's been a bit of a discussion recently. Yeah, amongst the regen ag community, really saying I don't want to just sustain my soils because they're not. I need to regenerate them. That's sustainability. That's not what it means to me. It means different things to different people. It means to me that we can carry on with the system we're using indefinitely, and it supports all those involved. It produces enough food. It keeps your soil in a good shape, and it keeps the environment in good shape. I think the main thing to me, and we've seen this when we do carbon, footprint calculators, is burning fossil fuels in order to produce nitrogen that we can put on our crops. So the whole pulse thing. If we can improve that, somehow we've got to get to a stage where we're not reliant on fossil fuels, essentially, because that is we know that's unsustainable. That's a good kind of glaring example of it. So that's what sustainability means to me. The whole thing is circular and goes in cycles. But it'd be very easy to say, and I know I'll come up with arguments with organic people on this, but well, don't put any nitrogen on. There you go, sorted. But sustainability is wider to me. So if we didn't do, we've got to think of society as a whole. We've built this X billion population of the world, and we've got to feed them. And if we all just stop putting on nitrogen tomorrow, that would be a major issue. So sustainability has a very wide ranging. It's the planet, and but it's the humans on the planet as well.
No, that's you've got a really good point there, actually, and that's the thing. It's kind of a a balance that we try to find, don't we? And in terms of we don't want to put on more nitrogen than we have to. A, because it's bloody expensive, and B, because we know it's not great for the planet. But at the same time, if you don't put it on, then yeah, there's no doubt about it. You won't get the yields. So there has to be a balance in there somewhere. It's interesting that you mentioned the NCS project, actually. So this is a 4-year, a £5.9 million project. It's the one of the largest ones, actually, in the Farming Innovation Program. It's led by PGRO. There are 17 industry partners, of which BOFIN is one, and we're leading the farmer-led element of it. And within that, we have 10 Pulse pioneers who are doing trials. And the whole idea of this is to increase the use of peas and beans. And as we know, peas and beans are not the most reliable crop, and they're not the most profitable crop. But what we want to look at is what does it contribute across the rotation? And that's A, and then B, how can we improve that contribution across the rotation? And specifically, it's about reducing nitrogen use along with other things. We're also looking at feeding trials as well, and trying to improve the value of peas and beans in livestock rations as well. But specifically on the arable side, we're looking to improve the profitability of peas and beans, really, and improve the production, not just within the year that you're growing it, but across the rotation. One of the things, so what we're looking at in the first year is we've been setting up, so all of our Pulse pioneers have got within their bean crop an area that's not grown with beans. So it could be, I don't know, spring oats or whatever. And then next year it all comes into the same wheat crop, and they're going to do a comparison of the what was beans against what was not beans within their wheat crop. And in both years, in this year and then in next year, they're going to be putting their crop through the yen, ADAS yen. So that gives you an analysis not just of the yield, but also the leaf analysis and nodulation, flowering, and all those sorts of things, and grain analysis as well. So hopefully a really nice data set of their, what sort of contribution the peas and beans are making. So, I mean, is this some? Do you think this is something that you might be interested in getting involved in?
It is, definitely. I was just finding out a bit more about it on your stand, but it's what is I've read before. People saying, "Why don't farmers grow more peas?" You've got to grow more peas because of all the nitrogen benefits and the carbon and everything. And I mean, we know why, because they are, as you referred to, sometimes unreliable. Or beans, where's the profit? That's the key.
Yeah.
As you referred to, we could, if we replaced all our imported soya with our own beans or peas, perhaps that might be the answer. So that's one really key area. And the other area is, although we fixed nitrogen, one year I grew, as part of my on-farm trials, I grew a cover crop, then I grew vetches for the whole year. So I didn't crop a strip; it was just a tram line. And I then grew, after the vetches, I just mulched them in, and I grew some oilseed rape. And the rest of the field didn't have those previous vetches. It just had wheat before it. And I grew the same or a bit more yield on no nitrogen, just from the vetches. But of course,
Right.
I wasn't taking off the grain. So one of the things which we do in when we're growing peas and beans inevitably, and that's where we put a lot of the nitrogen and protein. But I see in the NCS project at least one farmer was under sowing with clover as well underneath the beans. So if we
Yes.
can, it's really interested me how we can get as much nitrogen fixed in that year as possible and actually leave. Obviously, inevitably we're going to take some off, but if we can leave as much as possible in the field for the following crop. So that was really interesting. Some people are putting, I see, Vixaran on or other, kind of endophytes or microbes that will fix nitrogen on the leaf. So, which we are actually doing in part of our conservation ag trials here as well. So that's another aspect that really interests me, and whether we can get some hard figures on the difference between oats and beans and peas. That would be really useful, because I used to grow a lot of oats, and they were conservation grade oats, and it worked quite well for a while, but it wasn't sustainable, to go back to one of my points.
Right. Yeah. No. Well, I'd be interested to know more about what sort of trials you're doing. One of the really nice things about the Pulse Pioneer trials we're doing this year is that all of the Pulse Pioneers, as well as doing the beans versus non-beans or peas versus non-peas trial element that I mentioned just now, they're all, as you say, trialing things like Vixaran, Nutritia, a number of other products as well. Some of these manufacturers make quite bold claims about these products. So hopefully we'll get some good, on-farm, honest data from this as well. Oh, and one important aspect about this trial, which is also important about Slimers, is the discussion element of it as well.
Right.
And we've been encouraging you to come onto the Slug Circle, which is our knowledge exchange area. Well, it's within the knowledge and farm area on the farming forum. If you go to the farming forum front page and scroll down, you can find the knowledge and farming area, and within that there is the slug circle, where the discussion has been going on, looking at slug control. And you've been bringing your views on there, I think, Andy. How did you get on with that?
Yeah, I mean, the more we can get it going, the better, because you know what it's like. Some of the best meetings, and it's not just me says it. A lot of farmers. Some of the best meetings you go to are just going onto a farm and talking to people, and stuff comes up and comes out rather than just going and being talked at. So if we can get that going, obviously I'm not going to meet. I understand in the Slimers, poor old Clive was going from Scotland to Kent to Cornwall to do his soil sampling and things like that. So I'm probably not going to meet the man or woman in Scotland and Cornwall. So if we can, get the discussion going online.
Yeah, no, well, that's our aim. It's an uphill struggle, I have to say. I mean, the thing is about these online discussions, as you're probably aware, there is this, you'll get you'll get a discussion going and some really interesting points made and so on. And then, whether it's the Farming Forum or whether it's Twitter or X or whatever, then it's gone, it's disappeared. What we're trying to do within these forums is bring it together. And the other aspect about these forums is that anyone can see them, but you can only contribute to it if you're a member of the forum, and it's monitored by Sky as well. So the discussions within our forums, at least, is not going to dissolve into one of bashing the NFU or talking about Red Tractor or anything like that. Is going to stay relevant, and the idea is that then that keeps all of that information and that really valuable information. We've had some really interesting discussions on there. Actually, they're already there. If you go to the Farming Forum, as I say, and then look for the Knowledge and Farming area, and then the Slug Circle, you'll find quite a bit of discussion on there. The other, as you mentioned, we've also got Pulse Pep, which is for peas and beans, and then we've also got the Soil Circle, which is for our Truth Project. So this is Thriving Roots Underpinning Total Soil Health, which is where we're looking below ground at what the relationship of the soil microbiome and roots. So that's another interesting project. I don't know whether did you pick up much about that when you had a look on the stand?
I did read about it briefly. Do you know what? Mm-hmm. Like I've said, I'd love to do them all. Because they're all interesting.
It's finding the time.
I just can't do everything. But no, well worth doing. And definitely, obviously with I mean, to be honest, when I stopped ploughing, that was 25 years ago. Soil health was not in my head at all. I had a banking head on, and I was thinking about saving money. And it's just been, amazing how it's all evolved and what kind of differences we've seen in our soil and the soil health and how it changes over time and what a difference it can make. When I was young, I remember there were patches where I remember, going along with my power harrow back and forth, bashing up bits of soil that had turned to concrete. And if you had told me that I would have a better seed bed, in inverted commas, just drilling straight into it, I just wouldn't have believed you. But it's quite amazing how it changes over time. So, the soil, that soil project will be absolutely invaluable, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, now, of course, all of our projects, those farmers who do the trials at the centre of them are paid for the trials. And it would be the same with the NCS project and Truth, if you wanted to take part in those. All of them, there is a requirement that you are a project ambassador as well, and that you share all the findings and so on, and come to our events and so on. We are looking for Pulse Pioneers and Root Rangers more. We've got 10 of each at the moment. We're looking to double that number on both for next year. We're only the best farmers need apply. So we'd very much welcome your application, Andy, but obviously only if you can afford the time. But anyway, listen, time's rattling on, and we haven't talked about your third area as well. So do you want to remind us of what that was and why you chose it?
Well, when I found myself wandering around, it's about using all my buildings that are now full of all sorts of non-farming stuff for farming again, really. And I found myself the other day wandering around with my daughter saying, that shed we used to rear calves in. I used to love doing that, and that shed we had chickens, sold the eggs. That we had 1,000 ewes lambing over there. And it'd be really nice. It'd be brilliant if we need more food. We know we need more food, and we need it to be available to everyone and not have to have people going to food banks, etc. If we could get back to a stage, I know some people will be shouting at the screen saying, well, you could have a nice, I could get rid of all the old furniture and the extraordinary bits of stage scenery we've got in these buildings now and go back to having animals or whatever into them. But unfortunately, the truth of it is at the moment, it would be a lot more work for less money. And, wouldn't it be great if farming and food was valued enough that the best thing I could do was to have some more farming enterprises. I mean, I've looked at vertical farming quite a bit in recent years, and I've been keeping a close eye on it. But typically, indoor
All right.
vertical farming, it takes a lot of investment, it takes a lot of energy, and the margins are wafer thin. Which sounds kind of similar to what we've already been doing. So it's tricky, but that's we are in effect. The BPS is going down and disappearing. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'm subsidizing my food production with my own diversification, really. And we're all society. I'm talking about. We're all in this together. We all want nutritious food that we can all afford, and a lovely countryside and a planet that's not warming up. So we shouldn't be arguing with each other, really, and complaining about farmers making smells and stuff like that. We should all be trying to work together. And if we could get back to that stage where we were a multifaceted, all cycling, circular farming system, all here, that would be brilliant.
Yeah. No, well, I absolutely echo what you say, Andy. Although with one reservation, I don't think it's about getting back. I think it's about looking forward. Interestingly enough, just this morning, actually, I had a planning guy around where we're applying or planning to apply for the Rural Prosperity Fund, which they've got, and it's one of these local things which is supposed to, it gives you a capital grant to develop something within your farm that would help towards rural prosperity, I suppose, is the loose term that they're looking for. And we're specifically looking to convert a building so that we can have meetings of our local farmer cluster group, which is really taking off now. And it's great to see that there's actually some proper backing behind things like biodiversity net gain and so on and so forth. And we've been very lucky that we've picked up a landscape recovery bid thing. So it's all becoming a bit more serious now. And which means, but we've never had a meeting room. We've kind of sort of been going to all sorts of salubrious places to meet up, which hasn't really worked all that well. So it'd be nice to have a place where we can actually meet. But along with that, there's also BOFIN. I mean, BOFIN has been expanding. There's now a small team of us, and we need somewhere that's a bit more of a proper office than what I've got here. So I see, that's I see that as a good use, and it is actually sort of it's not core farming, I suppose, but it is hopefully helping rural prosperity and helping us move forward towards. I suppose that's an interesting thing about biodiversity net gain. It's getting value out of farming, I suppose, but it's not food production. In fact, it's anything but food production. So I don't know how you feel about things like biodiversity net gain.
So we need to produce more food, but we need to do it with less resources, don't we? Less land, less water, less inputs. And basically, we're down in the middle of the southeast, and we've got so many calls on the land. There isn't enough land to produce food, produce a good biodiverse countryside, have enough houses, produce renewable energy. There isn't enough land for that, basically, at the moment. So we really need to, if we're just making incremental changes to our farming system, tweaking a fungicide application here or getting a slightly better variety there. So to me, to be able to accomplish all these things, we need we can't turn our back on technology, basically. We really need to continue the research and embrace, big game changers. And I know you mentioned, which I'd be really intrigued to hear more of. There's a gene editing project coming up. Is that right? I don't know anything more about it.
Yes, that's right. Yes. This is bringing the first gene edited cereals onto commercial farms. This is following the genetic technologies bill that went through the Genetic Technologies Act, as it now is, that went through Parliament last year, that allows farms just in England to grow gene-edited crops. And so we've identified the first three that are ready to come out into the field that we're going to be bringing through and starting a new platform called Probity. which is a platform to rate organisms bred for improved traits and yield. The three crops themselves, or the three cereals. There's Nigel Holford's. So this is Professor Nigel Holford at Rothamsted, who has developed a low acrylamide wheat. I don't know if you're familiar with acrylamide. When you burn your toast, and it goes black. Apparently, that's what produces acrylamide, and it's to do with the asparagine content in the wheat. So Nigel's found the gene that controls asparagine, and he's switched it off basically, and that's what he's achieved in this particular wheat. And then there's also Cristobal Wowie at John Innes Centre has and his team have developed. They've been looking at a range of genes that control grain size and the physiology of the ear, and in particular one that controls the actual grain size. And so he's got these bigger, bolder wheat, and it's he knows that the quality is better, Hagberg specific weight and all of that. Whether it's better yield or not, I think comes down to the agronomy. Of course, he hasn't multiplied up enough yet to bring it into the field, but that is what we want to look at in that one. And I think there's potential there to completely rewrite the agronomy rule book. Everything to do with nitrogen timings and tea timings and so on. Really, really exciting there.
Wow.
And this is just one gene. That there's a whole range of them. I can't remember what they're called, the Maddox genes or something like that. That they're tweaking. So this is the first one of that. And then the third one is a barley. Where this is Professor Peter Eastman, and he's developed a high lipid barley. So the forage, the leaves and stem within this barley has got a high lipid content. Not particularly interesting for barley, because who would make a forage out of barley? But if the idea is he's made this transformation, and it's something that they've been trying to do in grasses for years. There's a GM grass where they've achieved it, but not in conventional grasses. But he's made this edit in barley. We're confident we can get it into a grass as well. But what we're going to do with this barley is multiply it up and feed it to cows and see just how it performs as a silage. Is the idea, and the promise is of this. It's something like if you raise the lipid content of forage by 1%, you can get a 5% reduction in methane emissions. It's and also there's productivity gains as well. The opportunity to cut down on your soya use and so on is great. So those are the three. Just to sort of temper your enthusiasm here, by the way, Andy, we've got literally just a few kilograms of each at the moment. We're multiplying them up as we speak, but we are hoping to deliver enough to around 25 farms overall. We're looking to get involved in 2025-26 cropping season. So harvest 26 is when we'll be harvesting the first gene-edited crops. So I hope that's something that you might want to get involved in.
Oh God! What really pleases me is that acrylamide, causes cancer. So if we can get rid of that, brilliant. If we can get bigger grain sizes and produce more food, we're doing good things. If we can reduce the methane that cows are producing, and with the obvious climate change benefits. So this is what we really need to do with this technology: is do things that society recognize as being beneficial to them, and then I'm hoping then it should be acceptable. And the way we're doing it with the gene editing, it was a terrible mistake with the genetically modified stuff where we essentially did it so that we could spray more glyphosate or something like that, which is not of interest to society, and it's probably seen as a negative thing more than anything else. So if we can concentrate on these, those three things you were talking about, that's brilliant, because they're actually, everyone can see that that's a good thing.
Well, I hope it'll be a pipeline of new traits coming through. I mean, we've got a unique opportunity here in England, in that England is the only place across the whole of Europe at present where gene-edited crops can be grown on commercial farms. So we've got a unique opportunity to take the lead. And to start looking at these, and that's why it's so important. My feeling is that there's a lot to think about and there's a lot to talk about. with these crops, and and I hope that we're going to generate a lot of discussion around it. And there's all sorts of things like IP, and whether it's going to be tied up by big ag
Yeah.
and those sorts of things. Quite apart from any of the traditional concerns that people have had with genetic modification, and whether it is genetic modification, and just what people will accept and what they won't accept, and so on. And so we've my feeling about this, Andy, is that we need to get these crops out into the open, into farmers' hands, get the discussion going, and so on. Because I always feel that if you're just having these discussions in theory, and there's nothing there that you can actually tangibly touch or whatever, then there's no point, because you can come up with all sorts of fears about what it might do and all sorts of opportunities that will never materialize. So it's not until we actually sort of get them in the field that we can have a proper discussion, an open and transparent discussion about what these technologies can do and what they can't do as well, and get a really real feel for it. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to us as farmers as to whether we grow them. So I think for me, almost more important than the actual growing of the crops itself is going to be the discussion around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and the IP thing's a very interesting one as well. I mean, I would much prefer. See, I don't want to use insecticides, so there's some BYDV traits obviously out there now, and I've used some varieties that didn't perform very well, but I've got buzzard winter wheat, for instance, at the moment, winter barley. Other people are talking about adding an IP payment to their BYDV varieties, and to me that's wrong, because that will inhibit the uptake, and they're basically, then it should be a good thing not using insecticides. There's a massive reduction in insects, which is not good for us or the planet, and so it should be a good thing. So it shouldn't be allowed to have an IP on it. If it stands up in the marketplace as it's good to grow and consumers want it, then it will sell, and the breeder will get their money back. If you add an IP payment on top, it just puts everyone off, because the farmers think I've got to pay more for it, and the consumers think, oh, it's just to make a big corporation richer. Anyway, that's my
well, that's a very moot point, actually. And I mean, at the end of the day, breeders have to know that there's going to be a return on them making an investment in a new crop. And actually, to be fair, this is why one of the reasons we're going ahead with this platform is that so Nigel has been trying to get breeders to take his new trait into their lines for a while, and breeders, understandably, have said, "Well, look, where's the return for us? No farmer's going to get an upturn on this. So why on earth, we can't charge more for this? So why on earth should we make the investment?" And conversely, he was talking to food manufacturers, and they're saying, "Yep, no, sounds really good. You deliver us 100 tons, we'll turn it into biscuits and breakfast cereal, that would be great. But we will need a good substantial amount of it before we make a decision." So it's this sort of chicken and egg situation.
It is,
and which is why Nigel approached us and said, "Do you think farmers would be interested?"
Well, it's good, because if we can get it out there, we're now seeing, for instance, I'm part of one of the Miller's regeneration programs, so we will get a bit of extra money to do some regen. So then they can market it to the consumer, because the consumer is now getting more aware of the whole regen issues. They will buy it preferentially. So that comes the money. So it is chicken and egg. But if you can educate the consumer and say, well, acrylamide is an issue. This week, this loaf of bread has not got any acrylamide or much reduced, then then they buy that preferentially, and there's the market, and there's the money, basically.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, by the way, just to put everyone's minds at ease, we've been talking about acrylamide and so on. Manufacturers do keep the acrylamide levels in their products low at the moment. They manage to, through the way that they blend, through the way that they process the flour in particular, and additives and things, they can keep the acrylamide level low. So don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your biscuits and your breakfast cereal at the moment. If you choose to burn your toast, that's your problem. But that's the whole point. I mean, of course, one of the big things at the moment is ultra processed food. So the opportunity for the food manufacturers is to reduce the amount of processing that they have to do in order to keep the acrylamide levels low. So hopefully what we're going to be doing is creating a healthier breakfast cereal, healthier biscuits from this is the main aim of that. But look, we must bring this to a close, Andy. We could probably go on all day talking about how we can change food and farming in the world and so on. But before we go, I'd just like you to think about, or just sort of say, where do you think this is going? We've talked about sustainability, on farm research. The future of food production and productivity on farms, and so on. Where would you like to be at the end of this? Where the direction for your farm, or perhaps for UK farming? Where are we going?
I hope we're going. We had the Green Revolution, didn't we? Which we're kind of now still in that kind of mode of doing things, and it was fantastic, and it fed the world and supports the world at the moment. I'm hoping we'll have another kind of revolution where we move on to a different level of production where it'll involve all these technologies we're talking about, but where we won't be reliant on fossil fuels, where we won't be reliant on chemicals that may or may not harm the environment, and where we can move on to something, my fabled, well, not mine, but the fabled sustainability that I don't think we've got anywhere near cracked yet. If we can move towards that, and I think you referred to a revolution in agronomy, with one of those wheats, I think I'd like to see. I mean, perhaps I'm thinking a bit too big, but I'd like to see another revolution, in the way we farm.
I absolutely endorse that. I think you're absolutely right, and they keep talking about the fourth agricultural revolution. Right. Actually, and don't they? So I don't think that's too big at all. I don't think that's ambitious. I think we're in it. We started it, or it's. I think it is underway. But my ambition, tied in with yours, is that we position ourselves as the leaders of that revolution, and I think we're really well placed to do that, especially if you look at the genetic technologies thing, the window of opportunity we've got with that. We really can be the stepping stone here for these new exciting traits that are coming through, and help sort of show which of these traits are the ones that are going to deliver the positive benefits, and which ones perhaps should be shuffled to the back of the queue. I don't know. But that's just one aspect of it. I think we're really well placed in this country, with farmers, quite frankly, with farmers like yourself, Andy, and the other members of BOFIN, to actually do exactly as you say and bring about this new revolution. Why not?
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Bring it on. Okay, fantastic. Well, look, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for telling us all about your farm, what you've been getting up to, and so on. And I hope all goes well with. It won't be long till for harvest now. And I hope all goes well with harvest. And I do hope I can persuade you to get more involved in some of our trials going forward. Thank you so much for all your help so far. You've been a brilliant slug sleuth, by the way, and it's been a pleasure working with you in this. And I must come down to see you in Kent as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you'll have me, of course.
Please do.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Andy, and thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And join us again on another episode of the BOFIN Buzz.